Everyone, Alex here again for some more image reviewing, more images from the Red Sea and a couple of other random ones I think this time. All these pictures from my June 2025 trips to Egypt, to the Egyptian Red Sea. So the first one is a MFO3 image, and it's wrong button. Picture of a Red Sea favourite, a cleansing of wrasse. That was just about to exit the frame, but I managed to get the shutter down in time. And I quite like the quirky composition of this. I think because there's content around the bottom of the frame, I think I would have preferred it if it was, absolutely perfectly in the middle. But it's quite fun that it's at the top. And I quite enjoy that Sohal surgeonfish in the bottom left corner coming in as well. This is a pair of masked butterfly fish, Red Sea endemics, just a macro shot of a pair hanging out. They often sit like this. I'm not sure I love the background on this. It's relatively easy to shoot these guys on blue. Not always as neatly lined up when they're on the blue, but it's easy to shoot them on the blue. And I think that probably is a perfect shot of that. It would be nice to have that yellow against the blue rather than against the reef. But because they fill most of the frame, it's fine. And I've actually only processed this one out because it's a good comparison shot with a picture I took with the MF. This is shot with the straight 90. But it's a good comparison shot with the shot that I took with the MFO 3 lens of the same subject. So that's the only reason it got processed out. Another MFO 3 image, this one of a crocodile fish just on the seabed, shot with a relatively open aperture. Though it's f8 actually, so surprisingly, this is not cropped or anything, so I was very close to the crocodile fish, but I like the narrow depth of field. I think I'd have probably liked a bit narrower depth of field, actually really throw that background right out of focus. But yeah, maybe the crocodile fish wasn't that cooperative, or maybe I did open the aperture more than this later on, but actually this was the best pose. So that's why I processed this one out. Another shot with the MFO3 of a stonefish. It's not a really big one. This was a kind of a medium-sized stonefish. You very rarely see them anything other than fully grown in the Red Sea anyway. And this was a sort of a medium-sized one. And I spotted this one because it was on the move and it settled down in this area, and I was able to use sort of a cross strobe lighting effect just to pop it out from its background. Kind of from the top as well, so that's where you can see the drop shadows underneath it that look pretty cool. And this is on the same dive, similarly using kind of an inward lighting effect on this one with the intention of trying to light the moray but not have too much light going onto the reef behind to get that separation. This is a kind of a funny shaped moray. It had a kind of a strangely skinny head. You can see, oh sorry, zoomed in way too much there. If you look behind its head here, it goes very narrow. It was kind of a weird looking moray, which kind of accentuates the effect of it looking very three-dimensional coming out of the picture because of the weird shape of its head. I don't know why it had a weird shaped head. This one with the fisheye lens, just a shot of some butterfly fish, some Red Sea bannerfish and some masked butterfly fish hanging out underneath a nice big table coral. This was right underneath the back of the boat on one of our dive sites, and it was just a good shot, just a nice little scene. I would have liked to get a neater formation of the four fish here. Obviously one of the masked butterfly fish is hiding. The two bannerfish, I think the forward bannerfish is a little bit awkward in the frame. And I took a few shots of this, and I've got one where the masked butterfly fish comes right up to the lens. But this was kind of the best of an okay bunch. I like the setup very much. I like the blue water. I like the fact that you've got the table coral dominating the frame, and I like the fish. But I think there was a really nice shot possible here where the fish were better lined up than they are in this picture here. I haven't got the right data up. There we go. So that's with the 13mm Nikonos, and these are with the 90mm, as I said. So MFO3, no MFO, MFO3, 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 and then the 15mm. And now on to the WACP1 of this scorpionfish sitting in a coral cave. It was a very cool scorpionfish, sitting in an easy accessible position with a decent background. So it was a nice opportunity. There was no flexibility because of where it was in the cave. You just had this one angle. And I did a vertical of this. One thing that was unusual when I was watching this scorpionfish is it spat out a big pile of bones after a while. And I've never seen a scorpionfish do that. I mean, I assume they do it quite a lot in the same way that, owls produce pellets and, cats cough up fur balls. And this guy, had a load of fish bones in his stomach and spat them all out again. But I've never seen one do that. I've got the photo of it doing it, and it's a scorpionfish sitting there looking exactly like this with a load of bones floating around above it. So without an explanation, it doesn't really work. But I'll definitely process that one out, and you'll be able to see it in a future image review because it was a cool moment. Anyway. Some more, another shot of the goatfish underneath the boats. This one's got lovely sunbeams at the top of it, a bit of reef and a nice ball of goatfish. There's a lot to like about this opportunity. A few divers bubbles around, but yeah, I think I went to a vertical in this situation just because there were divers and photographers on either side of me, and this was the best way I could get a cleanish image. There is a diver down the back here somewhere because you can see their bubbles up here. If we follow the bubbles down, we'll probably find them somewhere down the back here. There they are. So yeah, but it's a very nice setup. The beams are lovely. The goatfish look fantastic. Really lined up. Really looking at the camera. Very nice blue atmosphere because of all the fact that the light is, although it's relatively shallow, has travelled through a longer light path, so it's gone very blue. And I really like the feel of these shots. Right, another one of my favourite triggerfish. This is also shot with the MFO 3. I've processed quite a few of these pictures so that Matt and I can talk about them we're in the actual review of the MFO 3 on the Underwater Photography Show. Which I think I'll make sure that comes out before this video. So although I'm actually recording this video before we've recorded that, I'll delay this one so the first time people see these. So I won't talk too much about the MFO, but I'll talk about the subjects, which I won't talk about on the Underwater Photography Show. But when you do get, one of the things I always sort of tell people in fish photography is every now and again you'll get one of these supermodel fish of whatever species it is that for some reason on that day is just either super friendly or curious or interested in you. And that is your chance to get your best ever shots of that species. So I photographed, these orange line triggers many times, but on this particular day, I just had a super, super friendly one. And as a result, I was able to do a variety of different portraits. And I like these panning shots. As I said in the other video, I was trying to use the panning to do something with those orange lines and hopefully to get them to blur a bit. But it didn't quite work like that. It blurred the background very nicely, but not so much the fish. But nonetheless, I really like these shots, and really nice to get those such great shots of a species that's normally reasonably cooperative, but not overly cooperative. A stonefish shot with a single strobe. I think single strobe. It looks like single strobe. I don't remember now. I remember having my strobe in really weird position for this. It was out on a long arm. I was sort of doing a very strong side light, but I don't remember if I had both strobes on. The strong shadow on the left makes it look like single strobe, but the amount of light on the left side of the face also makes it feel like two strobes. So I'm not quite sure what I was using here. I'm pretty sure it was single strobe, and maybe just the angle it was coming in on the subject. But just a stonefish face, with that big frown at the bottom. And then another cute face. This one is a blue-bellied blenny. Very, very cute, smiley faces. They're very small, not quite as small as the unicorn gobies, but still absolutely SMC3. And using the technique, if you've watched the previous video to this, using that same approach to these high magnification shots, I find if I shoot them with too much magnification, and that's like the most you can do underwater, which is like with an SMC2 or something like that, really strong lens, I find the depth of field starts to become quite limiting. So I prefer to shoot them with the SMC3, which is still a very high magnification lens. But then what I do is, if I get a really good file with the SMC3, and I don't shut the aperture down too much, well, this one's f16, but it's I don't shut the aperture down too much. I make sure I get it really sharp, and then if I process it with super resolution, I can end up with a really big file still. This one is actually, because of the super resolution, it's bigger than the native crop. This is probably a 65 megapixel file off my 50 megapixel A1, but it's actually been cropped a lot to get this final result. But with the super resolution, I think that gives a really great shot, really good, the right amount of depth of field, and the subject really pops. But the final file is still big, and it's still huge, so anyone could use it for any sort of end result, which I really like. Anyway, and I just think it's worth talking about that technique or that approach, because of the fact, I think, for subject, a lot of the time, if you shoot, say, Shaun the Sheep slugs on a full frame camera, and I'm very much talking about full frame cameras here, you find that by the time you wind the magnification up enough to get that subject to fill the frame, you end up with so little depth of field that the end result is pretty useless. So I think I've taken to shooting them at slightly less resolution, but then, or slightly less size in the frame, but then using super resolution to boost the file size back up. And I think the end result is better that way, as long as you shoot that first shot really, really well, so that the you're not trying to, if you use super resolution on rubbish, it gets worse and worse. Whereas if you have absolutely nailed on focus and you use super resolution, it stays nailed on. Right. On to a picture. This is Steve swimming round the stern of the Dunraven wreck. I used to dislike the Dunraven. I used to think it was a very boring dive. But I think particularly first thing in the morning, it can be really nice with soft coral. And usually we go there for the glassfish, but there weren't any on this particular occasion. But it was still really nice dive with soft corals, and I'm growing, after 25 years of diving it, I'm growing to slightly like the Dunraven more than I used to. But yeah, that's as far as my Dunraven pictures are going to go. And there is actually some nice shots from the bow, actually, I must process, because I remember being quite pleased with those on the boat. So yeah, there's some more to come out from that one. And an anemone fish, another MFO shot. An anemone fish just on the red anemone here. Not a perfect composition. I was sort of trying to maximize the red and just basically zapped the anemone fish when it came in. I like the fact this was a very yellow Red Sea anemone fish, which I think really makes it pop on the red. I think the composition here is a little bit awkward. It's one of those turn your head to the side type shots. But if you rotate it round into a vertical, I can probably do that actually. There. I think it's worse as a vertical, so I think it is better as a horizontal, but basically it's not right as either a horizontal or as a vertical, but that's the way it's come out. So yeah, I've processed it out again because I want some MFO shots just to talk about, but I don't think it's a brilliant shot. And this is on the same dive, but this time not with the MFO, taken with the 90mm. Just a nice portrait of a black-tipped grouper. They've got great eyes, and if you wait in front of one, you can get great eye contact. I don't overly like the two pieces of Acropora sticking up the front of this shot, but they were there. I mean, you could clone them out very easily, but yeah, I'm not. I mean, it's that's how it was, so I'm not interested in doing that really for a shot like this. I think the top of the frame is a bit bright here. Could probably benefit from being darkened down a little bit more in processing, just to pull your eye really onto that face. And I find that probably more of a distraction than the two white sticks at the front of hard coral. Right, the cave at Shark Observatory, one of the caves there. Really lovely area, nice soft corals, big sea fans, lots of little antheas, groupers in there, and just a really nice atmosphere. And we tend to dive this site when the wall is in shade. I think it's really nice to dive in the afternoon. No one else wants to go there when it's in shade, and it's one of the differences between photographers and normal divers. Normal divers obviously want to dive on a reef when the sun is on it, so that you can see all the coral nicely lit up by the sun. Whereas soft corals in particular don't really like the sun, and they tend to come out when the reef is in shade. So we tend to dive the reef when the reef is in shade to get the soft corals out. But it also means when we frame up those soft corals, the sun is hidden behind the reef. And not in the case of this shot, but in case of other shots, we get these very dramatic silhouetted backgrounds as well. So, and that's one of the things, certainly, when I run a photographic trip, we time our dives often very differently to the other boats, not just to get peace and quiet underwater, but also to get the lighting conditions we want and the coral conditions that we want on particular dive sites. And this one shows a bit more the sun behind the reef escarpment, these nice soft corals that would completely kind of festoon this old sea fan. And then one of our group was just swimming out into the blue. I think that's Jean. It looks like Jean. And he was just swimming out into the blue. I don't think he was purposely modelling for me, and Jean, apologies if you were modelling for me. I think he was swimming out into the blue, but he was perfectly positioned for me to make use of as a model of opportunity. This is up at Temple, just beautiful late afternoon light up there, and I was just looking for anything in the right sort of depth range that I could photograph against it. These little hard corals are not overly attractive, but the sun is so pretty that I really wanted to process this picture out. So the corals are okay. It could really do with a nice butterfly fish or something in this frame just to lift that foreground. But the background is just stunning with the sun. Then it's on the same evening, going in again right at sunset and catching some fish spawning. And this is a pair of regal angelfish spawning. This small one in the middle is the female, much rounder than the male. And then you can see here she's releasing this ball of yellow eggs. And the male, as they often do with, or they normally do with angelfish, is nuzzling her just on her anal fin and swimming with her. And once she's released the eggs, in a moment here, he's going to just swim through them and release his sperm. But I've seen these guys spawn a few times. This site actually is one of my favourite places to watch them spawn, but it's more because of opportunity that it's a place where I can usually do a dust dive, because the group is often doing sunset splits at this time, and I've had my fill of sunset splits, certainly around Rascati. So I go and do this dive just off the back of the liverboard, and I've always really enjoyed it for fish photography up in the shallows. Okay, back down onto the wonders of Ras Mohammed, the amazing soft coral and anthias scenery that just dominates that reef. There's always another nook, cranny, outcrop to photograph, and yeah, I always enjoy it. The corals grow and change enough year on year that the sort of different images always come around, and this is just on a morning dive on the outside of Shark Reef. This is round the back of Yolanda Reef on a bommy we called Alex's bommy, which is a very, very photogenic bommy, offers lots of different photographic opportunities. And here I was one of the themes I was working on during this workshop was I wanted to create these very semi-messy but really action-packed wide-angle shots, just as a bit of fun, really, just as a different challenge. So not minimalist, graphically strong, close-focus wide-angle, but much more life-filled wide-angle shots. And to get that chaos of life, here I've just added a camera rotation just for a bit of fun, really. So this was shot on a 30th of a second, but I was moving the camera pretty fast, just to create a little bit of movement blur. When I saw all the white tips of the hard coral, that gave me the idea. I thought they would blur really nicely in the picture, so I just tried a couple of spins, and it's just a little bit different from what I normally shoot in that area. Okay, next up we are, and I think all of these will be taken with the, these are all on the same dive, all taken with the 13mm fisheye. And then this picture here, lots of lovely soft coral growth, and I was particularly pleased on this to get this saddled grouper. These are the groupers that often live in caves, so they look very like a coral grouper, and they are another Keftofolis species, but they're the saddle groupers. They're common under overhangs and in darker places. In any caves, you'll nearly always find them, certainly in the Red Sea. And they're often reasonably approachable, and this guy was just watching me from this overhang, and I just waited and waited until he swam a little bit more into view. I think I'd much rather he was facing into the picture than looking out of it, But apart from that, he added a nice focal point to this scene, which was a very attractive scene, but a lot of bits and not really any main focal point. I like the shape of the blue, but yeah, it really needs it's kind of more of a background this than a main scene. So it would be a really great place to photograph something in front of all this lovely coral, rather than trying to make this coral the foreground, which is why I was waiting for this grouper. I'm not convinced it completely works, that shot. And this is a standard coral grouper, the Miniata, the Cephalopholis Miniata. There's so many of them on the front of Shark Reef, and I very often do that dive with a macro lens, particularly a 100mm or a 90mm macro lens is ideal for that. You just sit off the reef slightly, and the groupers are in their little overhangs, and there's loads of them. They're very used to divers, and they just sit there looking out at you, and you just wait until those pectoral fins come forward, until the eyes are both looking at you, because most of the time they just watch you with one eye, and then you hit the shutter. And yeah, I never feel like I get the definitive shot of that species. I always get nice pictures, but not quite perfect. I never know why. Anyway, it's always good to have a challenge, and I guess, yeah, for me, coral groupers are going to be a lifelong challenge for that perfect shot, which one will always elude me. This is on the same dive as the coral grouper, but this time with the MFO3 attached, and we bumped into this green turtle, and it was great for wide angle. I didn't have wide angle, but with the MFO3, I think I was able to get really quite a nice little portrait of the turtle, of its face, but also with some of the shell. Often when you meet turtles with a macro lens, you end up with face shots. So I like the fact that with the MFO3 I could get quite a large amount of the turtle in. Okay, into the thistlegorm now. This is one of the Bedford OYC tanker trucks that are on the upper level of thistlegorm. This is probably the most normal truck that's on the thistlegorm, actually, these Bedfords. They made loads of these. Most of the trucks on thistlegorm are quite weird and not well known, but Bedford OYCs are one of the most, or Bedford OYs, sorry, were one of the most widely built trucks in the war. There were lots of them, and lots of them still exist, so they're quite a familiar one. I've sat inside a real one, and taken this exact same view with my fisheye lens on land as part of our thistlegorm project. So it's always nice to shoot them. There's only one left with the steering wheel on. Sadly, about 5 years ago, the one to the left had its steering wheel removed. It's actually, well, it was still on the wreck when I last. It was stashed away on the wreck when I last looked, but sadly not in the vehicle anymore. And that is a pity, because the one to the left was better for photos, because it was easier to get the blue coming in through the window, the side window, which I think is really important for creating depth in the picture. This was a 4-second exposure to get that blue coming into this picture. So that gives you an idea of how much it takes. There's no blur on the picture despite the 4-second exposure, because everything you can see in the frame here was just in complete darkness. So if there's no light, there's no blur. And there is blur where the light's coming in through the window. You can see the blur here, because I can't hold my camera still for 4 seconds. But I can hold it reasonably still. So I think the blue serves the purpose of creating the depth. That's not a focal point of the image, but it's about creating depth in the composition. And I think despite having the super long exposure, it works really well. Now, just ahead of this truck, there's a hole starting to form in the bulkhead ahead of this truck. And maybe in a couple of years' time, that hole will actually be big enough so you actually start getting light coming through from in front of this vehicle, which will really change things. And that area is always really fishy. So there might be some photographic potential in the future with this truck as the wreck ages. Another thistlegorm. This is kind of the biggest lorry that you can obviously see on the thistlegorm. And it's one of the Albion BY 305s. I don't remember which one it is. And this was a bridging lorry, so carrying floating sections for building bridges. And this one's still in, because it's got this big structure behind the cab. It kind of feels like a really big, substantial beast of a truck. And yeah, really nice to see this one. Very easy to find. This is right up on the forward end of hold number 1 on the starboard side. You have to squash yourself against the bulkhead to get this angle. But then when you do with the fisheye lens, you actually find you can get the whole thing in, which is pretty cool. I can't get, this is one of those examples. I shot this with the 8-15. And if I go to this same position with my Nikonos 13mm fisheye, because it's not quite so wide, I can't quite get this whole truck in, because it's like 170 degrees instead of 180. So I like being able to take this shot with that's one of the reasons I use the 8-15 in the Red Sea as well as the split levels. Right, here we are onto the wreck of the Kingston. This wreck is kind of, not only did it crash into the reef, but the reef is really taking it over. Only the stern section really still exists, but the stern section is very photogenic. I think it's better dive first dive of the day. We did this second dive of the day, and by second dive of the day, this one of my favourite shots you can do on the Kingston is having the stern of the Kingston really silhouetted by the sun, and then looking for subject matter that you can see within the shadow area of the stern, which is what I've done here. And I've got a nice school of these very pretty fusiliers with their yellow lines and their red tails. They're really nice. And there was one of my group up the top here shooting. It's a bit much to work out who that is by silhouette. But I don't think the stern of the wreck looks as nice from this angle. If I could be further to the right and still have the wreck in shade, then you'd really see this lovely shape of the stern. Like this, it's just a bit of a big black blob. And it's much better if you can move further to the right, and then you really see the rudder and the hole behind the rudder where the propeller is, and the wreck looks nicer. But this was second dive of the day, because we did the first dive on the Thistlegorm. And yeah, it's good then, but it's better one dive earlier, I think. And then the afternoon of the same day, I guess, we were across at Abu Nuhas and shooting the Chrysula K. The Chrysula K is really, sadly, as from a photographic point of view, really collapsing and falling apart these days. The change in the last 3 or 4 years of that wreck is really staggering. This is the workshop. Used to be very photogenic, really, really nice area for shooting. It's really collapsing. You can see the walls are all just at funny angles and ripping apart and breaking down. So there's still photos to be had in there, but it's not as photogenic, anything like as it used to be. And then the whole bridge section to that door that's on the right hand side of this, if you go through that now, you can hardly get out of it because there's so much stuff falling down the other side. And yeah, so much of the superstructure is collapsing. The sides of this wreck are falling off. And yeah, sadly, this wreck is definitely past its best for diving. It's still a really nice dive, but it was very, very photogenic all the way through the wreck. But now, particularly from the bridge area forward, it's definitely showing signs of just aging away. This is a long exposure. What's the exposure time? So this is a 1 second exposure shot on rear curtain sync, just with these, you can say it gives quite a cool texture effect as the sweepers sort of blur themselves through the picture. There's the pillar drill behind, and then the lathe is over here. You can maybe just see a bit of it there, inside this old workshop. But yeah, it's all falling apart in there. So I think the mess of this picture with the mess of the fish kind of works quite well with the mess that this room has become, compared to how neat and attractive photogenic it was a few years ago. Right, last couple from this pass of Red Sea images. This is further forward on the Chrysula K. And this is where the cargo of tiles on this wreck, and many people refer to this wreck as the tile wreck, has now become completely overgrown with hard corals, which is really cool to see. You can see all these particularly these big Bacilloporus growing all over these old tiles. You can see the tiles here. Sorry, my zoom is set far too much zooming in, but you can see the different tiles there. And then obviously I was drawn to this opportunity because with the afternoon sun, this was a great angle for shooting beautiful afternoon sun rays. Shallow enough on the wreck to get those sun rays. Not the most amazing foreground, but boy, that background is just a stunner. So I had to take a picture of this. And then the same sun, the same day, but a little bit later in the afternoon, heading off to do some sunset splits. Very, very nice and diverse coral garden here. With a whole mixture of species. You've got these boulder, is it Pavonas? Rubbish idea in that one. And then the Meloporas and the Passilloporas there, and a few bits of Acropora in there as well. So a nice, rich, high coral cover area for a sunset split shot. I did so many on this dive and only a few came out because having to float over the coral and just basically shoot these blind, holding the housing half out the water, because it was, it was too shallow to swim upright, and obviously I couldn't put my foot down or my fin down because it was living coral everywhere. So ultimately a nice result, but I had a lot of failures along the way. Oh, and then the final 3 pictures are some that I processed for my column in Scuba Diver magazine about a backscatter exterminator, and these are just some example before and after shots that I processed specifically for the issue. And obviously the left hand side of this one is an after, and the right hand side is before, so you can see how much backscatter there was obliterating the seabed there. And then after I've run backscatter exterminator, I'm probably zoomed in a bit too high here, let me just try and zoom out a bit, there we go. Oh, maybe not that much there. So before, you can hardly see the kelp, and then afterwards I think all the kelp looks really nice and just amazing. That's just the application of that software. It really is fantastic. And also what's important to point out with this one is it hasn't tried to take away any of these beautiful sunbeams. It's kept all of those in as well. And also the whiskers of the seal, it also hasn't tried taking those out either. So really cool to see how well it works. And then I tried to find the dirtiest picture I could possibly find on my hard drives and try backscatter exterminator on that. And this is backscatter exterminator on an old manatee photo from many years ago, from 2010, which was taken in a total soup of a morning, and had more backscatter than perhaps anyone has ever got in a photo ever. And I was able to get it clean and usable by using the software. So, and I actually cleaned it completely. Actually, just so it's having run it. It was I'd never even thought to process it before, because it was, and it's just a spin shot, so taken on 1/6 of a second. 15 years ago of the manatee. So hopefully that was another interesting run through of mainly Red Sea images. This was shot with the D700 and that was shot with the D5, but the rest is Sony A1. And hopefully that was an interesting run through. I'll be back again soon with another image review.